America's nuclear program began in deep secret. In 1942, the Manhattan Project quietly kicked off, mobilizing over 130,000 people nationwide to turn atomic theory into a weapon. Intelligence reports suggested German physicists understood the basic theory, and that was enough to trigger an enormous secret response. In Oak Ridge, Tennessee, massive plants enriched uranium. The gaseous diffusion plant, K-25, was one of the largest buildings in the world at the time. At Hanford, the B reactor went critical in September 1944, becoming the world's first full-scale plutonium reactor. Once the materials were ready, they went to Los Alamos, New Mexico. There, scientists under J. Robert Oppenheimer designed two types of weapons. The uranium bomb was a simple gun-type design. The plutonium bomb was more complex, using implosion to reach critical mass. By July 16, 1945, the effort led to the Trinity test in the New Mexico desert. A plutonium implosion bomb detonated, releasing roughly 18 kilotons of energy, higher than expected, and confirming this weapon was real. Just 3 weeks later, that weapon moved from test site to battlefield. On August 6th, the uranium little boy bomb struck Hiroshima. When Japan stayed silent, a second plutonium Fat Man bomb hit Nagasaki on August 9th. Japan surrendered by mid-August, ending the war in the Pacific. The Soviet Union detonated its first atomic bomb on August 29, 1949. The nuclear monopoly was over. In response, the U.S. shifted toward thermonuclear weapons, culminating in the hydrogen bomb test in November 1952, ushering in the next, more powerful generation. Domestically, these developments spurred rapid growth. Public tests, scientific studies, and regulatory agencies all formed around nuclear weapons as their role expanded. In the decades that followed, the U.S. arsenal expanded rapidly. By 2025, the U.S. maintained 5,000 nuclear warheads. About 1,800 are deployed, ready for use on submarines, bombers, or missiles. The rest are either in reserve or awaiting dismantlement. So, while the bombs were built in response to a wartime threat, they never left. They became central to U.S. military strategy, and they still are. Russia's nuclear program began in wartime secrecy. In 1943, with the Soviet Union deep in World War II, Stalin authorized the creation of a bomb project, not because of theoretical breakthroughs, but because intelligence showed the U.S. was building one. The Soviets didn't want to fall behind. The project was led by physicist Igor Kurchatov and overseen by Lavrentiy Beria, the head of Stalin's internal security. But the USSR lacked both the industrial base and detailed bomb designs, so they relied heavily on intelligence gathering. Soviet agents inside the Manhattan Project, including Klaus Fuchs, passed along crucial technical data. This included detailed information on the implosion design for the plutonium bomb and other technical specifications. These leaks significantly accelerated the Soviet program by helping them avoid costly and time-consuming missteps. Still, they needed to build the infrastructure from scratch. The heart of the effort was a site near Chelyabinsk, later known as Mayak. There they built a graphite-moderated reactor to produce plutonium. They also constructed radiochemical plants to extract the plutonium from spent fuel. By 1948, their first reactor went online, and they began producing bomb-grade material. Assembling and testing were handled at a separate facility in Arzamas 16, a closed city that mirrored the U.S. lab in Los Alamos. Scientists and engineers there worked quickly. They designed a bomb similar to the American Fat Man, an implosion-style device using plutonium. On August 29, 1949, the Soviet Union tested its first nuclear bomb at Semipalatinsk in Kazakhstan. It had a yield of about 22 kilotons and confirmed that the USSR had become a nuclear power. The success was kept secret from the public, but sent shockwaves through the U.S. intelligence community. After that, Soviet nuclear development accelerated. In 1953, they tested a boosted fission device, partially thermonuclear, based on a unique Soviet design. 2 years later, they had a true hydrogen bomb. All of this was done under tight control and often brutal conditions. Labor camps were used for construction, accidents were common, and safety was a secondary concern. But the state pushed forward, driven by competition with the U.S. As of 2025, Russia has the world's largest nuclear stockpile, with approximately 5,580 warheads. Roughly 1,200 to 1,500 of those are deployed on operational systems, with the remainder in storage or awaiting dismantlement. China's nuclear journey started in the mid-1950s. Mao Zedong, alarmed by U.S. tactics during the Korean War and Taiwan Strait crisis, decided that nuclear weapons were essential if China wanted to avoid being coerced. They began in 1955 under the code name Two Bombs, One Satellite. With Soviet help, they built research facilities in Beijing and a gaseous diffusion plant in Lanzhou. By the late 1950s, technicians and advisors from Moscow were helping set up uranium enrichment, reactor design, and bomb theory. But as the Sino-Soviet split deepened in 1959, all Soviet assistance was pulled, leaving China to continue alone. Undeterred, China pushed forward. By January 1964, Lanzhou's plant had produced enough weapons-grade uranium. On October 16, 1964, technicians at Lopnur in Xinjiang set off China's first atomic bomb, Project 596. A uranium implosion device, it released about 22 kilotons, immediately putting China among the world's nuclear powers. Just 2 years later, on June 17, 1967, they tested their first thermonuclear weapon, test number 6 at Lopnur. It hit a staggering 3.3 megatons, proving China could deploy more advanced, multi-stage bombs. Step by step, they laid the foundation for a nuclear triad. They built reactors and plutonium production facilities, developed missile forces under the PLA's 2nd Artillery Corps, later renamed the PLA Rocket Force in 2016, and tested air-delivered weapons from their H-6 bomber fleet. Today, China's arsenal is expanding rapidly among global nuclear powers. From about 410 warheads in 2023, it is estimated to have grown to around 500 in 2025. Most remain in storage, with a small number potentially deployed. And China has constructed hundreds of ICBM silos, while continuing to develop a full triad of missiles, submarines, and aircraft. They did all this through a mix of foreign assistance, intense self-reliance after 1959, rapid industrial-scale enrichment, and secret field testing at Lopnur. For France, the nuclear option was about independence. In the aftermath of World War II, French leaders saw reliance on America or British protection as a vulnerability. They wanted a force that couldn't be vetoed by allies. Initial steps began in the 1950s, when French scientists developed the infrastructure needed for weapons research. This included plutonium production reactors, fuel processing, and eventually uranium enrichment. But it was under President Charles de Gaulle that the push became political doctrine. De Gaulle viewed nuclear weapons as essential to restoring France's global standing. The technical effort centered around a plutonium-based design. With limited outside help, French engineers built test facilities in the Algerian Sahara. On February 13, 1960, they detonated their first bomb, Gerbois Bleu, in Regan. It was an atmospheric test with an estimated yield of around 70 kilotons, making it significantly more powerful than the first bombs tested by the US, USSR, or China. Further atmospheric tests followed, until political pressure and decolonization forced a relocation. France moved its testing program to French Polynesia, conducting underground and high-altitude detonations. There, in 1968, they successfully tested their first thermonuclear bomb, Canopus, marking their entry into the Hydrogen Bomb Club. Developing delivery systems followed. Mirage aircraft were adapted to carry nuclear gravity bombs. Later, submarine-launched ballistic missiles became the cornerstone of their deterrent, carried by the Triumphant-class subs. France also invested in cruise missiles, capable of being launched from both aircraft and naval platforms. By the late 20th century, France had assembled a full nuclear force, but kept it deliberately smaller than those of the US or Russia. Their doctrine, known as dissuasion, emphasizes strategic ambiguity and independent launch authority. Today, France holds an estimated 290 nuclear warheads. The majority are deployed on submarines, while the rest are carried by air-launched systems, like the ASMPA missile, delivered by the Rafale fighter jets. France remains the only EU nation with its own nuclear arsenal, and it has no plans to give it up. After World War II, Britain found itself in a precarious position. It had helped build the first atomic bomb alongside the US through the tube alloys and Manhattan projects, but then American laws blocked further sharing. In 1947, facing a return to isolationist America and declining global influence, the UK decided it needed its own bomb. The program, codenamed High Explosive Research, began in 1947 under the leadership of William Penny, with oversight from senior officials including Lord Portal. UK scientists and engineers raced to rebuild what had been lost. They constructed plutonium facilities at Windscale, now Sellafield, and drew on expertise from returning wartime research. After testing slowed during the post-war years, by October 3, 1952, the UK was ready. Operation Hurricane detonated a plutonium implosion bomb aboard the frigate HMS Plym in the Montebello Islands, Australia. That explosion, about 25 kilotons, put Britain just behind the US and USSR, but firmly in the nuclear club. But they didn't stop there. It took nearly a decade to scale the program. By the late 1950s, Britain was working on its own thermonuclear design, culminating in a successful hydrogen bomb test in 1957. Delivery systems followed next. Initially, the RAF's V bomber fleet carried nuclear bombs. Yet, as Soviet air defenses improved, Britain's shift to submarine-based deterrence. Negotiations with the US, the 1958 Mutual Defense Agreement, allowed access to American missile tech and nuclear material. That led to Polaris submarines in the late 1960s, fully operational by 1968. These carried British-designed warheads but used US-built missiles. In the 1990s, Polaris was replaced by the Trident II D5 missile, fitted on 4 Vanguard-class boats, each armed with up to 40 warheads. Today, Britain maintains a sea-based nuclear deterrent as its sole system. The UK's stockpile peaked at around 500 warheads in the 1970s, then was cut to approximately 225 by the 2010s. Roughly 120 warheads are operational, with up to 40 on patrol aboard a Trident submarine at any given time. The program has evolved through key decisions, creating plutonium reactors after American cooperation stopped, mastering implosion and later thermonuclear design, and shifting from bombers to submarines with U.S. technology. India's pursuit of nuclear weapons started just a few years after independence. For Jawaharlal Nehru and physicist Homi Bhabha, nuclear technology represented not just energy but sovereignty. The early program was primarily focused on civilian nuclear energy for development, but strategic considerations for potential military applications emerged over time, particularly in response to regional security dynamics. Bhabha laid out a 3-stage vision, starting with nuclear uranium-fueled reactors, moving to plutonium reprocessing, and eventually building a closed fuel cycle. With help from Canada and the US, India built research reactors like Apsara and Cirrus in the 1950s and 60s. These reactors weren't just for science, they provided the plutonium that would eventually go into India's first bomb. That bomb came in 1974 at the Pokhran test site. India called it a peaceful nuclear explosion, But the implications were clear. The device used plutonium from Cirrus and was detonated underground. Its yield was estimated at around 8 to 12 kilotons, but it marked India's entry into the nuclear club, without signing the Non-Proliferation Treaty. From there, India's program slowed under international pressure. But behind the scenes, the infrastructure kept growing. More reactors, more reprocessing, and steady development of delivery systems. By the late 1980s, the Daruva reactor at Trombay began producing larger quantities of weapons-grade plutonium. In 1998, after decades of restraint and a changing strategic landscape, India tested again. This time, it was a coordinated series, 5 tests in total, covering fission and boosted fission designs. The Pokhran 2 tests included a claimed thermonuclear device, but the yield and success of the thermonuclear stage remained debated. India's delivery system grew alongside the weapons. The Agni series of ballistic missiles gave them range and mobility. The Prithvi series offered shorter range options. Eventually, India launched its first nuclear submarine, INS Irhant, closing the loop on a credible triad: land, air, and sea. As of 2025, India is estimated to have around 180 nuclear warheads, and its stockpile is growing. The country emphasizes a doctrine of minimal credible deterrence and no first use, but continues to modernize its arsenal and expand its missile capabilities. Following India's 1974 peaceful nuclear explosion, Pakistan's leadership concluded it needed its own deterrent. In 1972, Prime Minister Bhutto ordered Pakistan's first official nuclear weapons program. After India tested its bomb in 1974, Bhutto authorized Project 706, focused on uranium enrichment, working in parallel with existing plutonium efforts. Instead of plutonium reactors, Pakistan focused on enriched uranium. By the early 1980s, hundreds of these machines were spinning, producing enough weapons-grade uranium for the devices tested later. Meanwhile, scientists at Project 706 developed implosion designs. Their breakthroughs came in 1983 when they reportedly conducted a cold test, meaning the bomb mechanism detonated without a nuclear yield, proof of technical success and a major confidence boost. Construction at the Kushab complex began in the late 1980s, introducing heavy water plutonium reactors to complement Pakistan's uranium-based efforts. Kushab 1 went critical in 1996 and began producing weapons-grade plutonium by early 1998, giving Pakistan a second fissile material stream. Over the next 2 decades, Kushab 2, 3, and 4 were constructed in stages and became operational by 2015, significantly boosting the country's plutonium production capacity. Finally, in May 1998, Pakistan publicly tested its arsenal. Chagai-1 on May 28th in the Raskot Hills consisted of 5 uranium-based blasts. 2 days later, Chagai-2 tested a single device in the Karan Desert, likely a boosted fission or plutonium-based design, though exact details remain debated. Together, they demonstrated full weapons capability. Parallel to this, Pakistan built its delivery systems. It developed the Shaheen and Gauri missile families, solid and liquid-fueled rockets capable of reaching all of India. Meanwhile, modified fighter jets and cruise missile programs provided additional flexibility. The result? As of 2025, Pakistan is estimated to possess around 170 nuclear warheads, with projections suggesting a stockpile approaching 220 to 250 by later this decade. North Korea's nuclear program took shape during the Cold War. In the late 1950s, Soviet scientists trained North Korean personnel under the 1959 cooperation deal on the Yongbyon complex, and by 1964 to 65, a Soviet-supplied reactor was up and running, producing irradiated fuel. By the early 1970s, North Korea had built a facility at Yongbyon to extract plutonium from that used fuel. giving them, for the first time, the ability to produce material needed for nuclear weapons. The country formally joined the NPT in 1985, but evidence of secret plutonium activities emerged after inspections began in 1992. North Korea announced its withdrawal from the treaty in 1993, though it wasn't finalized until 2003, contributing to a breakdown in diplomacy. While plutonium was their initial route, North Korea also built a uranium enrichment facility, likely the Kangsong plant, after help arrived from Pakistan in the late 1990s or early 2000s. This dual path helped them advance two fissile routes, but they still had to prove it worked. Success came with 6 underground tests between 2006 and 2017. The first, in October 2006, was a modest plutonium device, but confirmed capability. The 2009 test was larger, and by 2013, their third device had an estimated yield between 6 and 16 kilotons, marking a clear step forward in design and execution. North Korea's missiles advanced alongside its bombs. They matured over time into a full delivery system, from short-range missiles in the 1990s to long-range ICBMs tested after 2017. By early 2025, Pyongyang is estimated to possess around 50 assembled warheads, with material enough for up to 100. They continue to expand enrichment and reactor infrastructure at Yongbyon, adding centrifuges and possible new plutonium lines. Israel doesn't talk about its nuclear weapons. It doesn't confirm, deny, or acknowledge them in public forums. But behind the silence is one of the most deliberate and secretive weapons programs ever built. The idea took root not long after Israel's founding in 1948. Surrounded by hostile neighbors, Israeli leaders saw nuclear capability not just as a weapon, but as a guarantee of survival. David Ben-Gurion, the country's first prime minister, pushed the vision forward. He recruited scientists, sought foreign partnerships, and kept the effort well out of public view. By the late 1950s, Israel had secured a deal with France to build a reactor in the Negev desert near Dimona. Publicly, it was described as a research center. Privately, it was something else entirely, a heavy water reactor capable of producing plutonium for weapons. The construction included not just the reactor, but an underground reprocessing plant, built in secret to extract bomb-grade material from spent fuel. Even allies were kept in the dark. When American inspectors visited Dimona in the 1960s, they were carefully managed, sometimes shown incomplete or inactive areas. Meanwhile, Israeli technicians were likely already producing small amounts of plutonium and developing implosion designs. By the late 1960s, Israel is believed to have had at least one working nuclear device. There was no test, at least not an acknowledged one, but the weapons were likely ready. During the Six-Day War in 1967, reports suggest that Israel prepared a small number of bombs as a last resort option if things turned catastrophic. The country's leadership adopted a strict policy of ambiguity. They would not admit to having nuclear weapons, but they would not deny it either. This allowed them to maintain deterrence without provoking direct international backlash or sparking an arms race in the region. Over the decades, the arsenal grew. Israel developed short and medium-range ballistic missiles under the Jericho program, modified fighter jets for nuclear delivery, and, according to multiple reports, developed nuclear-capable submarines. As of 2025, Israel is estimated to possess around 80 to 100 nuclear warheads, although the exact number remains uncertain due to its policy of ambiguity. While it likely has delivery capabilities via missiles, aircraft, and possibly submarines, the existence of a fully developed 3-component nuclear arsenal, land-based missiles, submarine-launched missiles, and strategic bombers is speculative and not universally confirmed. Thank you for watching the video and making it to the end. It is scary to think about the destructive power these weapons can produce. Let's hope they're never used in conflict again. I'd love to hear your take on it. Leave us a comment down below. And if you liked the video, please give us a like. It really helps the channel. And subscribe to get notified about more videos coming up in the future. Thanks again. See you next time.